Alright everyone, in more evidence that central planning does not really work, Venezuela is suffering even more. It's like for a while there was a lull because it's like there was a miserable status quo, and then another debt date approaches and things go a little bit screwy again for the nation of Venezuela. The fundamental problem has still been, all along, every time I make a Venezuela video I try to sum it up for people who haven't seen any of the prior ones. Simply this. Hugo Chavez wanted that oil money, and so any additional stimulant spending, by borrowing money essentially, which is can be a problem for us too, went right into increasing oil output. When times were good for oil, this meant he was making money hand over fist for the people of Venezuela. They had so much income they didn't know what to do with it. They had to take a bunch of it, bundle it up, and subsidize basically everything under the sun. Food gets subsidized, your microwave, your laptop, your electricity, everything gets subsidized. They had so much money you didn't know what to do with it. Then the oil price collapse happens. And it happens to happen on Maduro's watch. Now, Maduro didn't implement the original central policies of their financial situation. It was Hugo Chavez. Chavez is fundamentally the one that is to blame for Venezuela's crisis. By the time Maduro comes along, it would have been too late to invest enough of that extra oil money into expanding into other things anyway. No attempt was made to invest in any other significant infrastructure or type of income in a centralized system in which the government has its hands in all business endeavors. See, there's the problem with centrality. If you got wise people planning things, then it's fine. Typically, you don't get that. Typically, you get opportunists who want to say, well, this cash crop is all we're ever going to invest in, and they don't think forward to the future. They think about the here and now for their own income, their own popularity, and their own wallets, essentially, and the wallets of their constituents. That's what they want. They want to be loved, essentially. It's very funny. Unfortunately, this leads them to make shitty decisions. So now, you've got more food shortages going on to the point where it's becoming unlivable. The opposition backed away from talks with Maduro a few days ago, because Maduro's troops killed what they cast as terrorists, what people in the opposition would probably call freedom fighters, and what I would call interested parties willing to use violence. At this point, the opposition, hate to say it, but the less socialistic opposition is barely better than Maduro anyway at this point. They're corrupt too. It looks like they're going to try to go the legislative route, which is about the funniest thing I can think of. Like, Maduro's not in a position where he has to back down to these people, and I don't know really what they're doing. They're like, oh, we need to restore order and stuff. We're going to be in talks with the Maduro government. Why? That's not going to solve the problem of low oil prices. It's not going to solve the problem of now you have to put an inordinate proportion of your whole economy into making debt payments after years of wasteful spending, and you no longer have physically the money necessary to invest in other things that could help you get by during what's probably going to be an intergenerational oil price glut. It's not going to go away. Oil, when people said peak oil this, oil shortage, oh no, there's not enough oil, it's because the technology was too limited at the time to extract a hell of a lot of the oil that's actually there. They don't even 100%, it's not even particularly 100% known how oil is even generated. They don't even know what rate it's generated at. It depends on how it's formed. I've always thought that it gets squeezed into areas of low pressure by the presence of the excrement of certain bacteria that exist in certain types of rock more than others. Literally, it gets squeezed out over time from one place to another, tends to pool up. The liquid then, it tends to get fired to the surface. A tectonic movement can move it around. Sometimes it gets closer to the surface, sometimes further from it. I wonder what would happen if a giant lake of oil were to get too close to the core of the planet. If it were possible for that to happen. I wonder if it would explode or something. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't. I think it needs oxygen to actually burn, so probably wouldn't do anything. But, yeah, that's always been my thought. I've thought, well, there are bacteria in the crust of the planet. They do excrete something. I wonder where that excrement all goes. It's unlikely that the bacteria are eating their own excrement. Maybe there's radiotrophs forming oil. Fucking knows. Maybe it generates 100 times faster than they originally planned. I mean, they thought we were running out of oil. They were wrong about that. Why can't they be wrong about how it's formed and at what rate? So Venezuela, which has enormous amounts of oil, used to be sitting on, lakes of what were worth almost their weight in gold. Now it's sitting on a pile of bullshit. Unfortunately, the other problem is because they can no longer afford the maintenance required for all of the expanded oil infrastructure, a lot of that is degraded too. The other problem being, if Venezuela were to try to shut down some of its production, somebody else would just produce more. Namely the US. The other part is we're technically screwing them, not by the means that the leftists typically say. They say, well, evil colonialist, imperialistic US, CIA coup attempt, embargoes, like they weren't doing fine under the embargoes when the oil prices were high. They were doing just fine. They were firing ahead. And by the way, I don't even support the embargo. You don't need to embargo them. They can't buy anything anyway other than fucking a box of cornflakes, and it's going to be the generic kind. And I feel sorry for the people of Venezuela. Like, sometimes people assume they're like malice towards them, like, oh, communists, they're dying, haha. No, the people of Venezuela are suffering. Most of them don't even like Maduro. At this point, I don't think most of them like the opposition either, in all honesty. We gotta be intellectually honest about that. They're not, they're still corrupt. Still machine politic bullshit. They don't really have an alternative. The people of Venezuela need to adopt, they need to have a libertarian movement that says, okay, we're gonna get the government out of all aspects of business. We're gonna go back to, temporarily, we're gonna go back to farming. Because, if you were to do, the organic, niche farming thing in Venezuela, there would be no embargo, number one. There would no longer be a reason for, Uncle Sam to bully you, number two. And number three, you'd probably make a fortune. You do realize that sort of stuff is really popular. The U.S. would love to import it. People can't get enough of it. They don't want, the GMO Chinese crops anymore. They want something a little bit more local, and Venezuela's closer, nice climate. Tourism would be great for Venezuela. That's all that's propping Cuba up at this point, now that the embargo on the blockade on them has ended. Yeah, no disrespect to the people of Venezuela. Looks lovely, or it would look a lot more lovely if people weren't eating zoo animals. That's the fault of central planning. It's not even socialism. Socialism's just the administrative side of the central planning. The central planning determines what's going to be done with the economy, and then once you get the proceeds, socialism is the divvying up of the proceeds. The planning side is much worse. If you have a totally free market, you can actually have some socialism, but it has to be flexible with how much income you make. It can't be too burdensome. And if you rig it in such a way that some government official can hold it over people's heads for voting purposes, yeah, it's going to become a problem. We see that here in the United States. In Venezuela, it's the same problem we have with our, mixed model, essentially, like Chinese-style interventionist system on steroids. That's the problem. That and the fact that there was no diversification of the economy. It was one export. Oil. That's it. 90% of the economy. It's crude oil. Well then, if crude oil loses 2/3 of its value, what the fuck do you think happens to the economy? There's an awful lot of infrastructure you can't pay for. An awful lot of imports you need for your other things, like your Coca-Cola manufacturing. They have to import sugar. Well, where's the money to import that sugar going to come from? You still got to make your debt payments, and Venezuela decided early on, hey, debt payments will take number one precedence. They can't even make those anymore. And that's their number one goal, is to be able to make the payments. That's one thing that Maduro, in his credit, has actually tried to do, is make the debt payments. He can't even do that with the income they have. The problem is now you've got a rot, a sort of slow-moving tumor within Venezuela, and it's going to tend to get worse because now morale is low. And you've got chronic unemployment and all these other problems, and back pay owed to people that will never collect it, and people starving, and violence breaking out, and looting, and what little privatized industry is there, again, subject to being looted or nationalized at a moment's notice. All of the foreign investment has pulled out of the country. Yeah, that's a pretty shitty situation, dude. Almost as shitty as Haiti. Yeah. So, Venezuela's on the ropes. Unfortunately, if the opposition today were to blow Maduro's head off and take control, it wouldn't magically make things better. You'd still have the problem of your debt. You'd still have the problem of low oil prices and not enough income to diversify into other things. You would need a fully free market solution in which only privatized individuals in a totally decentralized and as unregulated as possible manner are taking up their various lands, farming it, doing what they need to do, and you have cooperation from the world community, which at that point presumably you would have. Venezuela then would have other things to sell. It could probably eventually build its own refining system and break even on its oil at least. It's still got a lot of it. The other problem, though, is long-term oil is going to be a loser. Assuming no mass instability in the world that, plunges technology backwards, solar and wind are slowly displacing fossil fuels. It's a free market solution, by the way, because you got to realize oil and gas and things of that nature tend to be subsidized at decent levels. If you were to repeal those subsidies, even unsubsidized solar at this point would be about as cheap, and it's gaining more and more efficiency much more quickly than these fossil fuels are. However, fracking, especially in the sense of natural gas, has given fossil fuels continued relevance. I don't think coal continues to be relevant at all in 20 years, except as an export. I don't think anybody in the U.S. will be using it anymore. That's just my free market prediction. In which case, that U.S. and Chinese and North Korean industry, as well as Russia, that will suffer too. That's about all. Peace out.